I want to be careful with how I approach this subject because it's a bit of a testy subject for obvious reasons. And I want to put out first and foremost that I want player safety as much as the next person. We want to reduce the risk of head injuries. I think the things that have happened to players recently, well, not recently, it's come out over the last few years in terms of head injuries. Players like Steve Thompson and Ryan Jones obviously saying that concussions have now had a huge effect on their life. It's heartbreaking and it's awful, and we need to do the maximum that we can to try and reduce these concussions and keeping the players as safe as possible. But what I want to propose to you today is an argument that what World Rugby are doing, what the RFU are doing, what other unions are doing is in the wrong direction. And I think it's slowly killing the game. There's a few things I want to talk about here, a few different points. First of all, I touched on this in my review with Italy-Wales. At the moment, we're not comfortable with contact and violence in the sport. The biggest example that I've seen of this was in Italy-Wales, where we had two players accidentally running into each other, head-on-head collision. We had to have a TMO decision to decide whether any foul play was there when it was obvious to everybody that it wasn't. It was clear and open play, lots of space. But then from the result, neither player had a HIA, a head injury assessment. Neither player had to go off, whereas one player actually bled from the head, was wrapped up for the rest of the game. So it was startlingly obvious that a head injury assessment was more than necessary. This is the biggest kind of contradiction that I have and the issue that I have with the sport. Rugby is a contact sport. It's an aggressive sport. It's a sport where I don't think you can deny a big part about it is trying to intimidate your opposition, trying to quell their momentum through big tackles, getting in the opponent's head through physical confrontation. I don't think we can escape that. I think it's part of the game that we love. I think it's part of a lot of sports that people love. American football is an element of that too. Boxing, UFC, all of these sports obviously have controversies with concussions and head injuries. I think one of the arguments that I want to make here is that World Rugby is not choosing the right actions in terms of doing what they can to limit the head collisions. I think they've gone for a very top-down approach of these are the new rules, you got to get to grip, and if you don't, you will be penalised and you'll be sent off and you'll be fined, rather than taking a data-based approach, taking a reasonable approach to the sport. And it's kind of resulting where we have someone grazing a shoulder against the chin and they get red carded when it's obvious that maybe they got flat-footed. And in the past, it would be more of a penalty and the game would not be ultimately completely changed as a result of it. I want to make it clear that things do need to change and processes, they need to be put in place to make the players safer. I think the move to having chips in the gum shield of players is big. I think that is the key to doing as much as we can for player safety. If we can make the process automatic in terms of chip recognises collision that could cause concussion, and that automatically sends the player off for off the field head injury assessment, so the doctor is not pressurised on the pitch to listen to the crowd, be pressured by the crowd, be pressured by the player, because all players want to keep playing. I think the only exception that we have is Feo Weboso ruling himself out of the French game, and that was a really great decision by himself to keep himself safe. But I think the argument could be made that if Feo Weboso was maybe in the game, maybe the adrenaline's running and he just wants to be there for his teammates, and if he has a concussion, he may not be fully aware of what's going on and his only thought is, I've got to get back in there. We need to take decision-making out of it. We need to make the TMO a factor in this. I think maybe there's an argument for another TMO referee solely to be looking at head collisions along with looking in real time at the data that's coming from these chips within gum shields, and that would just lead to an automatic head injury assessment. I think the NFL is doing something that rugby can replicate in some way, where as soon as a head injury assessment is required, an independent doctor, independent of both teams, comes in, the player's taken off the pitch, taken to the changing rooms, and they are assessed for their concussion, and then they're either ruled out of the game completely or they're allowed to come back in. And there's a concussion protocol that these players have to go through over a number of weeks. I think that's a lot better official process that we have than what we have now. At the moment, we have situations like I was talking about in the Italy-Wales game, and most recently in La Rochelle versus Leinster, the fullback for La Rochelle gets hit in the head. He's on the floor for a while recovering. The doctors even start to usher him off the pitch, and then the line-out goes and he just gets up and he starts playing again. And yet we're still red carding players for attempts to tackle that just sometimes go wayward. Again, I want to reiterate there are definitely occasions where the red card is used properly for head injury collisions. I don't deny that in any way, shape or form. I think it's getting to a point where referees feel like they're between a rock and a hard place. I've seen multiple occasions now where players get yellow carded or red carded for tackling a decoy runner or just bumping them when they are used to draw defenders and they have got nowhere to go. They don't change their line and they get punished for it. As I said, we've seen the grazing that would probably be a yellow card in my eyes, but turns into a red card. I just think there's a better way to do this. I think something that might be an uncomfortable truth for a lot of viewers is that contact and violence in rugby is one of the main reasons why it's popular. Do you know one of the types of videos of rugby that is the most popular on YouTube are big rugby hits? And not only that, it's illegal rugby hits. I'm not saying illegal hits should be put in the sport. What I'm trying to get at is one of the big points of rugby and why it's so popular is because of the aggressive nature of the sport. It's what draws people in. I think it's the channel that we can use to bring more people into the sport that's desperately needed. And sometimes people argue, and I've had it commented on my channel, yes, you have a point that you're not going to bring anybody new into the sport. You're not going to have people bringing their kids into the sport in the way that it is at the moment. And I would disagree. I think now that we know the data on the sport, we know what the risks are, their concussions are there, that I think people know the risks a lot more and they can choose to either take part in the sport or not take part in the sport. And then the choice, they're empowered to make that choice themselves. I know it's easy for me to say as I don't have children, but I think if I had kids at this point, I would be comfortable with them playing rugby. I think it gives them a lot of good that, outweighs the negatives for sure. And the problem is that we are losing potential fans because we get to big game occasions, World Cup finals, European finals, domestic league finals, and this is where casual, fair weather fans will come in and watch the games. And on too many occasions, because they're such amped up games, the odd player sometimes leaves a shoulder out and it hits a head. And obviously it should be a penalty, but they're automatically red carded. And the nature of the game is completely dead. It's just destroyed the entire atmosphere of the game. It then comes on to, can they do the impossible, which is usually no, because if you're at a final at that stage, you've got two teams that have been competitive for the whole year. So losing a man is such a big difference. And for those fans, they come in, they go like, whoa, I thought this was rugby. I thought, this is where we have big collisions and stuff like that. I feel like that was just an accident. That player's never coming back and now it's non-competitive. I'm not really sure I'm interested in this game. I'd much rather go and watch a different sport in general. I think we're losing fans because of this. I think there needs to be more sense into it. The head injury assessment, you can just bring somebody on temporarily, or it would be permanent if the head injury assessment is upgraded. I think that would sort that issue. But yeah, killing games that just with this red and yellow card business is just, it has the potential to kill the game. And I don't want that. I want it to grow, you know, and I don't think we're going to be doing it with us and commentators during the game. Just, you know, a guy comes in from the side and he's just a tad too high, and then we're watching it in super slow-mo, and the first thing that we're saying is, oh, he's in trouble, he's going to be coming off. And I don't know, I feel like we don't need to do this. This isn't what is required of the sport. We can do it better. We can still look to limit the amount of concussions that we've got by making it automated, by not having such harsh punishments, that maybe we have a different system rather than it going straight to red and having an authoritarian top-down look at the sport and saying, you've made a mistake, therefore you're punished for the rest of the game and you've cost your team for this tournament, for everything of their campaign. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think I've noticed, me personally, that we're already starting to see what the effects of these increased occasions of yellow and red cards are. I've seen dives a couple of times for things that were, you know, people jumping in the air to try and catch a ball, clash heads accidentally, and I've seen a couple of players take dives because of that. I'm not going to mention specific players. I don't think that's fair, but I think if you watch carefully, every now and again, it's not very common. It probably happens 1 in every 10 to 20 games. But it definitely started happening, and it's something that we want to avoid in this sport as much as possible. We do not want non-genuine behaviour to be coming into this sport. It's so free of that. It's free of any of those shackles that other sports have to have in terms of faking things, you know, obviously other than if you're a prop at a scrum and you're just trying to fool a referee. But what joking aside, I'm trying to say that the sport is so free of deception and trying to get a quick win, you know, or get instant reward for fooling somebody. It's never been a sport about that, and I think we're opening up the doors for that to be a thing. And now we're at a point where we even see that tackling below the waist is apparently going to be the way through this, and that all amateur rugby now has to have tackling below the waist. And that kind of, it takes out another element of the game, the typical top and tail challenge that you would have that would nullify momentum of the biggest player on the pitch that you would use. You would have someone take the legs and someone take the top of the body. And to be honest with you, I don't think this is going to reduce concussions that much. I mean, you can still get concussed by hitting people at the knees, and there's a study that I found here that I'm going to share a link to as well, that basically they measured that a rule change of tackling kind of below an armpit, it didn't actually reduce the concussions. If anything, it actually increased the concussions, and it also stopped the ball in play time as well. It reduced it down to what it was before. I just think there's better ways that we can go about it. So for me, I think we need to ditch the red cards for non-malicious play. I don't know how the yellow card system will work if we have a head collision. Maybe it goes to 15 minutes or 20 minutes if it's a head collision. Or maybe it's just the 10 minutes and we just have to accept you've done a head collision, the maximum it's going to be is yellow, but it's going to be yellow and you're going to have to come back in 10 minutes and you put your team at a disadvantage for 10 minutes. The red card just kills games. And I feel like last year in particular, that some of the biggest games, the World Cup final, other games too, were just so affected by a red card being brought out for someone that just made a mistake rather than a malicious play. Keep the red card for malicious plays, for dangerous malicious plays, like obvious clotheslinings, gouging, all these things that are not welcome in the game in any way, shape or form. Not even, I'm talking about, obviously we don't want high hits, but I'm talking about intention. Intention we don't want in the game. That's what we want to eliminate. We want to eliminate dangerous play that has bad intentions. Get that out. But at the moment, I don't think World Rugby and rugby in general is getting it right. And I think what we can do is we can use the technology that we have to make the process automatic and take out the referees having to call decisions like that and be criticised whether they give a red card or whether they don't give a red card. My conclusion in this really is
keep the red cards for malicious play, take the red cards out in terms of upgrading it for head-high collisions. If someone's just caught flat-footed and collides heads with somebody, it's a yellow card maximum. If someone comes in and clotheslines, it's a red card. You know, I don't think there's any two ways about it. The clearing out at rucks as well. It's someone's always leading with their head to try and jackal over and clear out, and you accidentally hit their head. Yellow card. No red card for that. Don't even review it. And let's really utilize this technology of the chips and the gum shield. Let's measure head injury assessments based on data for a collision in the head that would constitute a HIA requirement. Let's do that. And I think if we do these two things rather than having this top-down interpretive views of the laws for the referees to be the bad guy, basically putting them in the position where they're having to do the thing that kills the game, let's automate it. Let's take it out of their hands. Let's do something different. So I feel like I've rambled and I've gone different directions with this, and there's probably going to be a lot of editing in this video. I just wanted to get across that we need to do something about it, but we're not doing the right thing. And I think that's really key to get across. But anyway, let me know what you think. I'd be really interested to have a conversation with many of you about this one. So let me know what you think in the comments, and hopefully we can have a nice discussion about it.